Ever been scrolling through LinkedIn and you come across a profile and you just think, ugh. Like the picture's blurry. It was probably taken like 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And the headline's just like a bunch of corporate jargon. Like you can just tell they haven't updated it in forever.
Totally.
Well, today we are going to deep dive into how to avoid being that person on LinkedIn.
Yep.
We're going to be talking about Chris J. Reed's book, How to Become a LinkedIn Rockstar.
Have you read it?
Oh, yeah. It's so good.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah, it's really insightful. Like, it totally changed how I think about LinkedIn.
Me too.
So Chris J. Reed, he calls himself a LinkedIn rock star.
He does.
And he actually built his whole global company pretty much just through LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's wild.
So what's the story there?
Well, so first of all, you got to understand that Chris, he's got a very, let's say, memorable personal brand.
Like how so?
Picture this successful entrepreneur, LinkedIn expert, and he's rocking this bright purple Mohawk.
Seriously, a Mohawk?
Yeah, a Mohawk.
That seems a little counterintuitive for LinkedIn, don't you think?
That's the thing. It's brilliant. It's like this radical authenticity.
Oh, interesting.
Which is like his whole thing. He's not afraid to be himself at all, even if it means, breaking the mold a little bit.
So he's not just teaching this stuff, he's like living it.
Exactly. Purple Mohawk and all.
Wow.
And it works because it's genuine,
Yeah, totally.
But before we get to all the, Mohawk-powered marketing secrets,
Please.
we got to clear the air about some common LinkedIn myths.
Yes. Because I think we've all kind of fallen into those traps.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So myth number 1, LinkedIn is just for job seekers.
Oh, yeah. I used to think that.
Right. It's so easy to think that, but it's so much more than that. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a really powerful tool for branding and marketing.
Yeah.
Whether you're looking for clients or you want to collaborate or just establish yourself as an expert in your field.
It was true. I definitely thought that for way too long. Like, I'd only update my profile when I needed a new job.
Yeah.
Big mistake.
Happens to the best of us. Another big misconception is that it's all about who, personally.
Yeah.
Your existing network is important, but LinkedIn's all about strategically, expanding that network.
Okay.
Not just collecting connections.
So it's less about networking and more about strategically building a network.
Exactly. You want connections that align with your goals and interests professionally,
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the last myth and the one that Chris really dismantles is that LinkedIn is something you only need to worry about when you're job hunting.
Yes, guilty as charged.
Right. So many people treat their profile like a resume that they update every couple years.
Yeah.
But Chris is no, your LinkedIn profile is your resume.
Yeah.
It's always on. It's your 24/7 personal brand.
That's a really good point.
It's how you're presenting yourself, all the time professionally.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so Chris is definitely walking the walk when it comes to personal branding. But before we get too far, I got to know more about this whole taxi driver blog post incident.
Oh, yeah.
What happened there?
So Chris, he, let's just say he shared some pretty strong opinions about taxi drivers in Singapore. Yeah. And it didn't go over well.
I can imagine.
Especially with his employer at the time.
Oof, that's gotta be a tough situation.
It was a whole thing.
So how do you go from that to, LinkedIn rockstar?
Well, that's where the marketing genius comes in.
Okay.
So instead of backing down Chris, he kind of leaned into the controversy.
Really?
He realized that even bad press is still press.
That's kind of brilliant, actually.
Right. I mean, he accidentally created brand awareness, and then he used that to launch his whole company, Black Marketing.
Talk about turning lemons into lemonade.
Exactly. And it shows how important personal branding is, how you respond to challenges. Sometimes that's just as important as avoiding them in the first place.
True. Okay, but let's get into the actual strategies. How do we become LinkedIn rock stars?
So Chris says that you got to think of LinkedIn as more than just a social network.
Okay.
It's a search engine, like Google.
That's a good point. I never thought of it that way.
So keywords are key.
Okay.
Sprinkle those relevant keywords all over your profile, and it increases your chances of actually getting seen.
That's a good tip. I mean, I forget that people are actually using LinkedIn to, search for stuff.
Right. They're looking for specific skills, experience. It's not just casual browsing.
So what should I be doing?
Well, think about it. If you were looking for someone with your skill set, what would you search?
Okay.
Use those words in your headline, your summary, everywhere.
So don't just list your skills. Use the words people are actually searching for.
Exactly. And ditch the website blog.
Wait, what? Just focus on LinkedIn?
Exactly. LinkedIn's built-in blog thing. Way better.
How so?
Better visibility. More targeted audience. Plus, analytics. You can actually see how your content's performing.
Oh, that's a good point. I spend so much time on my website blog, but sometimes it feels like screaming into the void, you know?
Yeah, LinkedIn streamlines it. And to get even more out of it, you got to follow the 411 rule.
411, what's that?
It's a content strategy. All about finding the right balance between self-promotion and actually, providing value.
Makes sense.
Because it's easy to fall into that trap of only talking about yourself and your company on LinkedIn.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear someone brag all the time.
Exactly. So for every hard sell post about your business, you got to have one soft sell about your industry and 4 that are unrelated but still engaging.
What does that even look like?
Think about it like you could share an interesting article about the future of your industry. Okay. Give some tips about work-life balance. Even just ask a question that sparks a conversation.
Oh, that's smart.
The possibilities are kind of endless. The key is to be engaging and to give value.
I like that. It's not just about what you're posting, it's the whole mix, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this all ties into Chris's 1990 rule.
Okay, Chris and his rules. I'm sensing a theme here.
But they're good rules.
Mm-hmm.
So the 1990 rule, it's based on the idea that only 1% of LinkedIn users are consistently putting out original content.
Seriously, only 1%.
Yeah, it's wild.
So the rest are just kind of lurking.
Pretty much. But that's good news for you because if you start creating content, you're already ahead of the game.
Okay, that is encouraging, actually.
Right. You become the thought leader in your industry.
So I want to be in that 1%.
Yes. But it's not just about creating. It's about engaging, too. That's where the other 9% comes in. They're the ones commenting, sharing your content.
They're like mini influencers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they reach that other 90% who are just quietly watching.
Okay. Wow. That 1990 rule is kind of blowing my mind right now. I'm realizing I am definitely in that 90% and I need to step up my game.
Well, the good news is it's not too late.
True.
Anyone can become a content creator or even an influencer on LinkedIn. And Chris has some great advice for how to do that, especially when it comes to this idea of social selling.
Social selling. Okay, I've heard that term thrown around, but I'm not going to lie, it still kind of sounds like, I don't know, a buzzword.
It's one of those things, right? But it's actually pretty simple. Basically, it's just using relationships and content to build trust before you go straight in with the sales pitch.
So the opposite of cold calling.
Exactly. Cold calling.
The worst. I swear I once had a guy call me during dinner with my family.
Oh, no.
To sell me life insurance. Can you believe that?
That's brutal.
Yeah, talk about bad timing.
Seriously, though, cold calling is so intrusive. And these days, it's like people want to do their research,
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, before I buy anything, now I'm looking at their website, reading reviews. I'm checking out their LinkedIn for sure.
Exactly. Social selling recognizes that. Like, buyer behavior has changed. People don't want to be sold to anymore.
Yeah, they want to feel like they've made the decision themselves.
Exactly. They want to connect with experts, get some real value.
Okay, so how does LinkedIn actually help me do that?
Yeah. Well, they've got some really powerful tools for social selling. And Chris is a huge fan of this one, Sales Navigator.
Sales Navigator.
Okay.
Have you heard of it?
I've heard the name, but I don't really know what it is.
So basically, it's like having a personal assistant, but for LinkedIn. It's this premium tool that lets you zero in on your ideal clients.
Oh, interesting.
You can filter by industry, company size, what their job title is, anything you can think of.
So it's like a matchmaking service, but for business.
Pretty much.
Sure.
But it does way more than that. Sales Navigator also lets you see what your prospects are doing on LinkedIn. Like, are they posting? What are they sharing?
Oh, that's smart.
It gives you this whole different level of insight into what they care about, what challenges they're facing.
So instead of going in cold, I can kind of tailor my approach. 100%. So much more effective than just like sending out a generic message.
Right.
And speaking of personalized or, Chris also loves smart links.
Okay, now those I've never even heard of.
So let's say you're sending a potential client some content, like a case study or a white paper or something.
Okay.
Instead of just sending them a regular link,
Yeah.
you can create a smart link.
And what does that do?
So it's like you're packaging the content in a really sleek way.
Okay.
You can customize it with your branding. You can even track if they clicked it, how long they spent reading it.
Wow. So I can see who's actually interested.
Exactly. It shows them you care, and then you can see who's worth following up with. Again, it all goes back to being authentic.
Totally. You can have the best tools in the world, but if you're not being genuine, people can spot that a mile away.
100%. Like we were saying before, nobody wants to talk to a robot. Chris gets that.
Yeah, he walks the walk.
Totally. And another thing he's big on, recommendations.
Oh, yeah. Those are huge on LinkedIn.
For everything. It's social proof. you know?
It's one thing if you say you're great at what you do, but if other people are saying it.
Exactly. Chris tells all his clients to recommend him on LinkedIn, and clearly it's working. He's got thousands of them.
It's kind of like the online version of word of mouth.
Totally. So I guess the takeaway here is LinkedIn is a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
You can build your brand, you can network, you can even get leads, but you got to be smart about it.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, be yourself.
Yeah. Be a human.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to show your personality.
I like it. Any final words of wisdom?
Just remember, LinkedIn's always changing, so stay curious, keep experimenting, keep learning.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. This has been awesome. Thanks so much for deep diving into how to become a LinkedIn rock star with me.
My pleasure.
And hey, listeners, what about you? What would you ask Chris J. Reed if you had the chance? Think about it, and in the meantime, get out there and rock your LinkedIn.